La la la. Oh, they come, baby. Will they come again? Will they?
Hello.
Welcome back to our
Hi.
little.
Hello.
Welcome back to a little band of misfits, Jerry.
Glad to be amongst you again.
Yes, welcome back. Good to see you.
Thank you. Likewise.
Okay,
How are
so
you all?
all right, so we are now in the point I'm covering the Disney 100th marathon because Disney meant a whole lot to me when I was a kid, just running those Disney VHS tapes over and over again,
Right?
Which kid hasn't?
and
True.
and I want to capture the memories of those who had a firsthand account on working on these great classic films. And the
Mm-hmm.
reason why I'm starting to get more in touch with the people who worked on the Dark Ages and the Disney Renaissance is because there are people who are still alive that actually worked on those films. And and I've tried for the rescuers. I tried contacting Glenn Keane, but
Yes.
he couldn't. He didn't really respond. And and I also contacted John Pomeroy. He said he would jump on, but he had to meet a deadline. And I believe the
Yeah.
reason is Jen did. I word on the street is that
Yeah,
Jen
Bees
didn't
are
come.
working on a project for Kennedy Kowski.
Yeah. Well, I wouldn't be surprised. He's got a lot of skill.
Yeah, so I tried reaching out to Glenn Keane again for the Fox and the Hound, but he didn't respond. So I reached out to you because I know your name was in the credits. So I so now I have you, and let's I want to capture the memories of an institution that once was rather than an institution as people see it now, because I know there's a
Right?
lot of I know there's a lot of weird controversy going on social media about Disney, and I'm pretty sure you may have heard about it. And
Yeah, all different kinds of things. You can point out the ones that have caught your attention, but yeah, I've seen all different kind of discussions going on.
yeah, so obviously so so it's not that much different from when you first started at Disney Studio, and not so different as when the Fox and the Hound came out, because the Fox and the Hound will represent a turning point in the history of Disney animation. We would see the turning of the old guard, passing the torch on to the new generation and saying, you know what, we had a good run. Let's hang up our pencils and paintbrushes and hand over to some of the younger kids who will be carrying on the skills, so that because they think they've got some real goods here. And this was basically Frank Thomas and Ollie Johnston's last production, which they're animating on. And I think the
Yeah.
last one, which Wolfgang Reitherman was producing, or something like that.
Right. And I looked through it's called a draft of the picture. It's a list of every shot in the whole movie. So the production draft was sent to me, a copy of it, by a really nice guy, a Danish animator or director had sent me the draft. So I looked through it just today. And yeah, there's 56 different shots that I did, and all different characters, and a couple of them were close to Ollie's shots. Or there was one where Frank Thomas and I were doing like he would do a shot, then I would do a shot with the hunter and Chief the dog and stuff like that. So it was a real honor to be working on the last film with them. And I recall also Ollie Johnson walking in the hallway and seeing some of us young animators and coming over and flipping some of the scenes of his work, flipping the drawings so that we could look at it in the hallway. And There was a scene where the little puppy is hopping into a little pond. So he's like gleefully jumping in the air and splashing in the pond. Well, I saw his rough animation of that. He flipped it for us and was like, "What do you think?" And so we were talking about his scene. And so they weren't just in their rooms; they were coming out and sharing things with us and getting opinions and stuff. So that was really exciting.
Yeah. So
And I would just also, and let me just add one more thing, if I could. That when they retired, it was interesting because Eric Larson kept mentoring young people, and
I think there's an internet connection law. Oh man.
even though he wasn't, he was. Did you? Oh, I think your connection is back now.
Oh yeah.
I see you
Apparently,
moving.
I'm in Blairsville now.
Okay, well, you look okay from my side. But also, I was going to say that Frank Thomas and Ollie Johnson, even though they were retiring from being at the animation desk, they started writing their books then. So, The Illusion of Life, their first big book, they were retiring. They were
I read
leaving
that.
animation. Yeah, they were leaving their animation desks on the first floor and going up to I think the third floor where they had an office where they could write their book. So we were very aware of them still in the building and still working on their next project, which was starting to do the books.
Yeah. So this was an age where it felt like Disney wasn't exactly the world's foremost, like the highest when it comes to animation. It seems that other companies were actually starting to take a dig on Disney in some cases. I mean, look at this poster that I found for a film called The Kid Who's Gonna Go Home. Even the Disney company couldn't put any more love in it or any more joy. It's for anyone old enough to have a heart. And this is from some movie that looks like it was imported from Japan, or
Right.
and then dubbed to English. I mean, this is a state that Disney was at right now. Other companies were now starting to take a dig at Disney. And look at this. Can you see that?
Yeah. Yeah, I can. A lot of us young people and the veterans wanted to do things that were really dynamic and emotional and strong and cinematic. But the middle management and the people that were taking care of the business end of things were really cautious and didn't want that. So they were trying to actively get things less emotional, less dynamic. They weren't really interested in the cinema of the time. At the time, I mean, Brad Bird and me and Henry Selick and John Musker, Doug Leffler, there were a whole bunch of us who were like exhilarated by things like Star Wars, and Spielberg's films coming along. Each one of them, just the cinema, the storytelling was dynamic. And we felt like back when Walt and the team had made Snow White, they were being just as cinematic as any of those guys. And they were disrupting cinema back in the 1930s by shocking people with the first animated features and doing it so strongly that people would feel for the characters, and adults were crying in the theater when they screened Snow White. And we wanted to do that same dramatic, emotional, cinematic push in our day when we came into the studio. Now, people like Eric Larson and Frank and Ollie agreed, and they wanted to do that too. But the people like Wooly Reitherman and some of the other people and Art Stevens and Ted Berman, who were directing, were very cautious and didn't want that to happen. And in fact, I should just mention this, that while Brad Bird and I were in college together, we went to visit Frank, the studio, because I had been mentoring with Eric Larson before I went to CalArts, and Brad had mentored with Milt Kahl just in the days before he went to CalArts. So we both teamed up and we were working together, trying to make a student film together at CalArts, and we both went to visit the studio together. So while we were there, Frank Thomas and Ollie Johnson saw us and they motioned us down to the room and they said, "Hey, Brad and Jerry, you want to come see something?" And they were working on a scene at the time of The Rescuers, the first Rescuers film. And so Brad and I went down to their room and they put us in front of a moviola and they showed us a scene of Penny. It was just in pencil test form. They were working on it right then. And it was film of Penny down when Medusa had put her down in the caves by the sea and trying to force her to bring back the diamond. And poor Penny got swept away by seawater and disappeared down this cavernous hole. And Brad and I were watching at the Moviola, and it was like she swept away in the water and was gone. And she was just underwater and longer and longer. And we're like, oh my gosh. And then boom, she came up and gasped for breath. And it was so dramatic. And we both told Frank and I, like, wow, that was really powerful stuff. That reminds me of like Pinocchio and Snow White. And they said, yeah, well, you guys are probably the two last people to see it because, they think it's too dramatic. And Wooly wants us to tone it down and not make her underwater so long and everything. We went, are you kidding? That's so dramatic and involving that, like, you weren't scared of that when you guys did Pinocchio. You had him drowned face down in the water. You did lots of drama. And they said, well, don't tell us, tell Wooly, he's the one that's trying to cut it. So we said, we will. And so they got on the phone right then. And Frank and Ollie sent Brad and me up to talk to Wooly Reitherman in his office. And so we were just college punks, but here we were, we're arguing for Frank and Ollie, trying to get them to have their way against Wooly. And Wooly didn't want them to do something that dramatic. So Brad and I argued, and we talked about their wonderful, dramatic, cinematic films of their past, and encouraged him to live up to that. And he just was saying, well, people get angry and they write letters, and the parents don't want their kids scared. Anyway, he was nice enough, but he was really kind of patronizing. He was nice to us, but kind of patronizing. So we saw, even before we stepped in, Jordan, we saw Frank and Ollie trying to live up to the drama and cinema of their original days and being told not to. And so when we stepped in, we were trying to push, just like Frank and Ollie were, to make it dramatic and make it cinematic, and we were told not to. In fact, and I don't know if not many people know about this, but I was allowed to do sequence direction for an opening sequence for the film. Ultimately, it was not used because they considered it too emotional, too dramatic. But I had a little team, so I as I recall, Daryl Van Sitters was working with me. I think John Musker was working with me, possibly Brad. But anyway, this little team, we put together an opening sequence for The Fox and the Hound, and in the scene, the story is about an orphan little baby fox, and so I had the scene where the mother fox had hidden the little baby and then had run off to try to distract the hunter and the hunting dogs from the baby, to save the baby's life. So as she's going off to detract them, I had this scene where during the scene you realize that she's gone, just like in Bambi, you realize that Bambi's mother has been shot. Well, I did the same thing, and I still feel like it would have been a wonderful emotional scene. I staged it so that you saw her running, and then she came to the edge of a meadow, and she was going to have to get across that meadow without getting shot, because we heard the dogs barking and getting closer. We heard the hunter's voice. So she starts running, the camera's pulling back, and she's in front of the camera, running face toward the camera, trying to keep up with us. So we're racing back across the meadow, across the dangerous open part, and she's racing with her face towards us to try to keep up, right? So as we're moving back further and further, she goes over a little crest of a hill and then goes down out of sight, and we wonder where she is, and then she comes up over the next horizon, and she's gotten a little closer to us, and then she goes down out of sight and up over the next hill. So I kept the audience feeling like she's catching up to us. She's getting a little closer and a little closer. Maybe she's going to make it. And then she went down out of sight one more time, and there was a gunshot, and the camera keeps pulling back, and you expect her to come over that next horizon, but she doesn't. She doesn't make it over that next horizon, and the camera finally just slows down and stops, and you realize she's not going to make it. So you never saw her get shot, but you very much were powerfully emotionally involved with it. You were rooting for her to make it. And when she didn't, it was just heartbreaking and touching, and was not graphic, but it was powerful. So our little team gathered around and showed this to Art Stevens and Ted Berman. And it reminded me of when Frank and Ollie showed their sequence to Brad and me. It's like they were waiting for us to watch and wanted to see our reaction. So now we were waiting for Art and Ted and wondering what their reaction would be. And when they finished watching it, they were looking at the movie and they turned to me and they went, well, she's dead. And I said, well, that's the story. I mean, it's about an orphan baby fox. And they said, oh, no, you have to make the audience think maybe she got away. And I said, really? It is about a mother that got away but didn't want to come back for her baby? Or like, I thought it was an orphan, that this the story. So anyway, they said, no, it's too powerful. We can't do that. It's too emotional. So anyway, we weren't able to do that. So Frank and Ollie tried, we tried. So as you were pointing out that other films started to poke at Disney, it's like, we didn't blame them because we were trying to make it dramatic and to make it powerful, and we weren't being allowed to. So that left room for other people to try to compete and try to do the more powerful thing.
Yeah.
So that's what we were up against.
Okay, so I did hear what you were kind of saying, but I almost felt like the connection bugged out again. But are we still good?
Yeah, I can still hear you fine. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, I
Yeah,
can hear,
I can
still
hear-
hear you. So at this time, surprisingly enough, one of the animators at the studio just happened to be Tim Burton.
Mhm.
The guy who does all the gothic horror, the guy who just keeps on casting Johnny Depp. Apparently, I don't know if Johnny Depp is ever gonna do anything again.
I thought it was Jim Carrey.
Yeah, we were buddies. We were hanging out back then. We were friends.
Yeah, he wasn't. He didn't. It didn't feel like Tim Burton being an animator somehow didn't work out for Tim Burton, and
He had a very distinctive style, and it really didn't fit the sort of
uh,
timid version of the new Disney animation they wanted to do.
Also at this time in Disney just felt like they could just do whatever as long as they couldn't just get over that little R rating. And back then there were only like 3 ratings: G, PG, and R. And
Right.
they're like, okay, we're gonna try to do what we can with PG, but let's not make it an R. So one of the ways they would do that was try to push the boundaries in the live action department by making a horror movie of all things. I mean, you gotta do like a double take. What? Disney makes a horror movie? Yes, it's called Watcher in the Woods, and it stars Betty Davis. I mean,
Oh yeah, Watcher in the Woods, and I think Something Wicked This Way Comes, and
yeah. That, I mean, it was like, what are these films? They
Yeah,
don't
never heard of
scream
them.
Disney.
so there was one of them. I think I'm trying to remember whether it was it might have been Watcher in the Woods. There was one that had a creature that was supposed to appear and come out of the forest and be sort of hunting, and they wanted someone inside of this sort of big suit to puppeteer it. And I'm a fairly small guy, so Henry Selick was helping them engineer it and asked if I could go inside of it and like puppeteer the monster. So I actually have pictures of me, Polaroids that they took, where I was in sort of getting up on the rig and getting measured, and they were going to try to build the creature around me for one of those horror films. But ultimately, they wound up using a union actor to do it instead of me. I was one of the animators. But for a while, Henry wanted me to be like in the live action horror movie, like puppeteering the monster. So I participated
Man,
for a little while.
I mean, that's wild because I mean, I don't know. I mean, I don't know. I mean, sometimes these films were getting real edgy. I don't know how far they could go before they just drop the F-bomb, because
Well, yep.
I think he means like drawing the line per se.
Yeah, I think they were trying to do some stuff that was a little bit more mainstream filmmaking there. But then, very soon after that, when Eisner and Katzenberg came in, and they started Hollywood Pictures and Touchstone. And Touchstone was full R-rated stuff. They weren't even trying to do family entertainment with Touchstone. They purposely made an edgy department. So they eventually really expanded into that area.
Yeah, I knew that. I knew that was probably the reason, because Disney is like the all-American family entertainment company, so they wanted to try to not put the Disney name on an R-rated film of all things. So it's like, okay, let's just make this division happen, and that really started happening in 1984. But
Yeah.
and also there were a couple of things
But
happening
you know
that
what? I'll just mention though that if you go back and look at things like in Pinocchio, there's a scene where Lampwick and Pinocchio are starting to evolve and change into the donkeys. And as the metamorphosis is happening, and his hands turn into hooves, and he's screaming for his mommy. I mean, that's a horror movie too.
oh yeah,
It really
yeah,
was scary stuff.
I
Uh,
know
so
a
they,
lot of Disney's
so
done this.
they, yeah, so they did do powerful emotions, even lapsing into the edge of horror movies, but they weren't doing it for reasons of being exploitive and sort of adult, but they were doing it just for powerful storytelling. So they had done that in animation before, but it was kind of a different thing to see it happening in live action.
Yeah, I know, I know. I mean, so by this time, there were several things that were going to be working in a unique favor of Disney, even though people didn't think the animation department was not underutilized or something like that. I mean,
Mhm.
they were doing all this other stuff, but it wasn't like animation was it bigly invested or something like that. So so it seems that when it came to the Fox and the Hound, they just couldn't like afford some of the fancy stuff that they did in Bambi and the Forest Classic and stuff. But which is pretty much
Yeah, I noticed
hypocritical.
within the Z-Rock films, they hardly had any shadow effects going on.
But there was also not just a cost factor. There was an approach also that was just less. It was reaching for less drama, less perspective, less cinema. We would get layouts when we're animating. We had to work with the scene they had given us for the character to perform on. So an animator, somebody else, at least at a big studio, somebody else draws the environment for you. The layout in the background is done by the director and the layout department. And so your character, your animating, has to act on that stage. And we saw a lot of things come through that would be a very average sort of looking camera shot. It was almost like in live action, if you just took a tripod that's like 4.5 feet tall, and you just put it on the ground with a normal lens and go, that's your shot. It's like, where was the down shot and the wide shot, low angle, and the drama. They were making that not because it was too much of a budget. It was because they weren't trying to make those kind of cinematic choices. And the one scene where it did happen better was in the bear fight scene that Glenn Keane worked on, because that we were just really close to the end of the movie, and the directors and the different people that had been keeping us all doing it very safe didn't have time to mess with Glenn's scene too much. It was like near the end of production, so he would do this dramatic stuff, and they just had to kind of keep it going through production because they didn't have time to mess with it. And in our interview with Vanity Fair a few years ago, Brad Bird put in print, he said, I really think the reason the bear fight is that good is because there wasn't time to mess with it. It was at the end of the film, and that's the only reason it survived. If it had been another 2 years in production, they would have gotten that less and less and less dramatic until it was very normal too. So part of it was budget, but a big part of it was just choices being less adventurous,
Yeah.
In fact, there was a speech, and I'll just mention this, that when we were starting, we were just going to start the Fox and the Hound, and we had just finished. I had come in out of Cal Arts. There were 4 of us that were asked to come start working there after 2 years of the Cal Arts character animation program. So it was me, Brad Bird, John Musker, Doug Leffler from the animation class, and then I believe they brought Henry Selick in from the experimental animation class. And so the 4 of us, and the 5 of us, including Henry, suddenly were over at the studio in 1977, and they were doing the last bit of production on Pete's Dragon. So I jumped on to help them out with cleanup, the final clean line drawings for Pete's Dragon. where they had to do the combination live action and animation together and make sure everything registered just right. Meaning, if a live action person seemed to be holding animated character's hand or something, you had to line everything up just right when you drew it against the live action. So I helped him with that. Then I became a full-fledged animator on the small one, the Christmas special. And then we were going to start The Fox and the Hound. And Ted Berman and Art Stevens had a little meeting with us to start the film. And I remember Ted basically said, well, I wish we would just keep issuing, films out of our library, because we've made a lot of films. So we could just keep re-releasing the old films like every few years, and there's a new kids are born, and so it'll be the first time they see it. And just every few years, you just keep putting the old films out, and we'd be fine.
That doesn't seem to work in the long term, considering the
Yeah.
recent cultural crisis going on in this country.
Yeah, but that was their attitude back then. He literally said that. I wish we could just keep releasing them. But he said, but Ron Miller wants us to make another film, so we will. So he acted disappointed. Like, I really wish we didn't have to make another film, but I guess we do. So we're going to make it. So it was not like an exciting pep talk. We all left going, wow, that was the pep talk? He just was like, well, we've got to make a film. Ron wants us to make a film, so we will. It was like,
yeah.
not very exciting.
Yeah, so it wasn't very lively because because the people at the animation department at the first start of The Fox and the Hound were led by none other than Don Bluth. And he was not really so fascinated with the way things were going at the studio at the time. So on his birthday around 1979, he basically just left the studio, taking a bunch of animators with him. I don't really know how the heck he was able to do that, but he just started his own studio. And the first production out of the gate was Banjo the Woodpile Cat. And the second production was The Secret of Nim, the only animated feature I can think of where the lead character is a single mother. And
Here he goes again.
And then the hypocritical part about this thing that was happening at the Disney studio, where they couldn't just do a bunch of elaborate cinematic stuff on the lot, is that on the same lot, Disney was working on a live action movie starring Jeff Bridges that would showcase a brand new special effect. It was called CGI.
And I was computer graphics, computer image choreographer. Bill Croyer and I were the two computer image choreographers on that film. So I jumped from the animation department. I was the only person in my animation department that jumped onto that film with them. So I did production storyboards across the same desk as Mobius, who was a renowned artist. And then as soon as we were done with shooting the live actors, then Bill Croyer and I were the two people that did computer image choreography for all of Tron. So every computer graphics shot went through Bill or me, and we would storyboard everything out and plan it and then supervise it as it went all the way to the conclusion. So we were excited to be doing that. I think that gave me a lot of the adrenaline that I wished I could have had on The Fox and the Hound. I wish we had been pioneering that whole time. But since we weren't, since we were sort of held back, I was excited to go volunteer to work on Tron. So I got to be a part of an unusual era. And remember, John Lasseter came in and started peeking into our trailer on Tron and asking about this computer graphics stuff. And it was fun to introduce him to it.
Yeah. So there was also something else at the time that would indirectly benefit not only Disney, but the animation industry, to kind of try to push it a little more towards beyond what Saturday morning cartoon limits could provide. And it's three words: MTV. I want my MTV. And music television.
The music television channel?
Yes, music
Yes.
television launched
And that's
the
back
same
when
year launched
Yeah,
the
that's
same year.
back when it used to be music videos. Now
Yeah.
MTV is hardly ever has music videos,
So
but
so
back
back
then it was.
yeah, I know. So music television launched the same year the Fox and the Hound came out. And while it did not invent the music video, it brought the medium to a mainstream that got animators thinking, you know what, we have a new medium that we can express ourselves and show off unique types of animation while we have these songs playing in the background, and we could have a little more edge to it in some of these music videos. And it was the symbol or something like that for Gen X, the young people who were growing up at the time.
Yeah, and in the small world of things, Bill and I had worked on Tron first, and then he went and did after Tron. Bill went and did the Dire Straits song "I Want My MTV." He did the music video for that in using computer graphics. So
That
that
was
was
Money for Nothing video.
yes, the Money for Nothing, and but they say I want my MTV. So yeah, Money for Nothing video. That was Bill Croyer doing that, and then Henry Selick wound up directing a lot of the IDs where they would use to go to and from commercial for MTV. So Henry wound up doing stop motion as well, and Bill did CGI. So part of our team jumped into the music video scene as well with those things.
Yeah, even Aha's Take on Me video with the rotoscope animation
Yeah,
took some new direction in how
yeah, it
animation could go. Um,
was very cool.
so I think I
And
don't know
at the
how much
time, just so you know, at the time, since we had not been allowed to be adventurous on the Fox and the Hound, there were a bunch of us that were trying to do what would have been incredible if we'd been able to do it. It was Will Eisner's comic book, The Spirit, that he had done in that film noir style. It was just beautiful illustrations. Brad Bird and I had gotten that backed by Gary Kurtz, who was a producer on American Graffiti and Star Wars and The Empire Strikes Back. And right after those three films, he backed Brad and me to try to get an animated feature of Will Eisner's The Spirit off the ground. And that would have been all the cinema, all the storytelling, all the brave stuff that we were hoping to do back when we first walked into the studio. Ultimately, Gary couldn't get that going in the industry. The studios would read the script and they would really like the script and say, oh yeah, let's make this movie together. And then they would find out that it was animated. And then they would go, oh, why do it in animation? Oh, that's for kids. And we went, no, it's not. Animation is for anybody. But anyway, they would back away as soon as they would find out it was animated. So it was that was a shame, because if that had gotten going right at that time, we were ready for something as revolutionary as, in many ways, The Incredibles were when Brad did that years later. But it was that kind of filmmaking we were ready to do back in 1981, 82. And it was my plan, along with Gary and Brad and a bunch of us, to have it be the first computer inked and painted system, feature. So we were like years before they did CAPS, the computer ink and paint system at Disney. We were ready to do it with a computer oriented production system on The Spirit back in 81, 82, 83. So I really wish we could have pulled that off, but there were a lot of people trying things.
Yeah, had you done it, it would have been the first all digital movie made in Hollywood. Of course, Fox and the Hound came out. Yeah, the Fox and the Hound came out, and how much box office was the Fox and the Hound compared to Tron? I believe Gene Siskel and Robert Ebert, like Siskel and Ebert, like gave this well, how about a 7 out of 10? I think they might have just given a 7 out of 10 because I don't know what I don't really have like a resource to pull up with me, but I think Roger I do remember seeing a video where Roger Ebert and Gene Siskel were talking about the reissue of Cinderella and how great that movie was, and how they kind of like, the Fox and the Hound was released earlier this year, and that had some of that touch to it, because they were able to do because they seem it's not like they would have what they did with Cinderella, but they they did think that the Fox and the Hound had a similar charm to it. So
Well, I think it, and for years did not watch Black Cauldron, which came next. But
yeah.
I saw some of it pretty recently. In the last 2 years, I finally took a look at Black Cauldron, and I think Fox and the Hound was a better film than the Black Cauldron turned out to be.
Oh man.
So it wasn't. I think that I feel like the darkest days were during that. Shortly after that. So Fox and the Hound wasn't I think the very darkest days, but it still had some charm. But man, it could have been so much more. And it's, I think a lot of people think that Frank and Ollie and Eric Larson and Milt Kahl and Ward Kimball and Mavis, like the surviving 9 old men, had kind of grown tame and had grown soft and everything. And that's not true. They really still wanted to do all the emotion and all the dynamics. It was the people telling them no that was the problem. So the veterans that had been there with Walt and the young people in our generation, we all wanted the same thing, but none of us could get it past the money keepers that were putting together the budget and the direction for the Fox and the Hound, or Cauldron. We looked at the pre-production art that Mel Shaw had done for the Black Cauldron, and it looked really dynamic. And if they had really taken that approach of going, we're going to be good filmmakers like Coppola and Lucas and Spielberg, and we're going to do that with the Black Cauldron and just do something amazing, it could have been incredible. But it took a very different direction than any of that. So the Mel Shaw's concept art with pastels wound up being way more dynamic than anything I saw in the scenes of the film that I watched.
Yeah, I mean,
it's a real wonder how the animation industry survived.
It was sort of touch and go for a while there, wasn't it?
Oh yeah, definitely a rough period, but at least you survived, and that obviously is going to be our next movie, the Black Cauldron, the film that almost killed Disney animation. And
Right.
and I would tell a couple of things that would benefit in the next video. I'll probably tell about the Black Cauldron, and I also will tell about how several things benefited Disney at this time. But as a person who actually grew up with this film on VHS, like the Fox and the Hound, I still find it pretty awesome after all these years, because you try to put whatever heart you could into the film, and as we just whipped through these films on Disney, as we whipped through all of these classic movies on Disney Plus, we come to this film, there ain't no red flags on there. I mean, I know they have to do the red flags. I know they kind of want to try to move on from ugly parts of the past, and they want to try to reimagine tomorrow, as they say, even to some backlash and such. But the Fox and the Hound didn't have a warning on it. No contains tobacco depiction. No 15-second this film contains outdated depiction.
But you know,
I think the one at least
interesting
pointed out about the potential of gun violence.
Yeah, that now this is interesting too, because I'll just mention this briefly, and then I have something else that I could bring up about Fox and the Hound that you might find interesting. But we were talking about Touchstone coming in and doing things that were definitely R-rated, like that, and really changing the game. But one of the people that they worked with in Touchstone was Robin Williams in Good Morning Vietnam, right? I worked with him after that in animation doing Back to Neverland, which played for years in the Disney MGM studios in the animation pavilion, where ultimately they had a working animation studio in Florida, and people that would come to visit would go into the theater and see my short film that I had done concept and writing and direction for a live action and animation combination piece starring Robin Williams. And Jeffrey Katzenberg was afraid that I was going to put red flags all over the animation by hiring Robin, because he said Robin Williams is an adult comic and he has substance abuse problems and stuff. So that's not for Disney animation. And I pointed out to him that Walt Disney had hired Cliff Edwards to do the voice of Jiminy Cricket. Now, that actor, Cliff Edwards, was a vaudevillian performer, and his stage name was Ukulele Ike. And he made dirty records with adult jokes on it and stuff. And for mom and dad, not for the kids. That was, he did like adult, like for a nightclub where people would go drinking and they'd listen to his dirty songs. But, and he sadly died an alcoholic years later. But Walt Disney hired him because he knew that there was a charm inside of that guy, and he didn't have him do any of that edgy stuff. He pulled him away from it and had him do things that were really charming and heartfelt. And I got to do the same thing with Robin Williams, where in Good Morning Vietnam, there was all the edgy stuff, the adult stuff. When he worked with me, he just was so good-hearted, and he didn't do any of that stuff. So even though we worked with an edgy touchstone performer, when he worked with me in a Disney animation, it was completely just charming and heartfelt, and we didn't put in any of that, the red flag stuff.
Yeah.
So,
actors get typecast so easily.
They do, but boy, did he have a range.
Definitely.
But yeah, Fox and the Hound, you're right. We were all trying to put heart into it, and I looked at the draft, the list of all the scenes, and there were 56 scenes that I animated in the film. And the first ones I did were Big Mama and the baby fox right after the mother has left it by the fence, and near the very opening of the film. And all of us that were working on it were, still as much as we could every day, trying to put stuff that you could care about in the film. And then I also did, so Big Mama, the baby fox, and then the two birds, Dinky and Boomer. I did the key scenes with them, and then did some of the hunter and some with Chief, and some with Copper. So I got a little taste of a bunch of different characters, but I had to do this thing where the two directors, Art and Ted, they were starting to hand out scenes. I got interested in the little bird, especially Dinky, and then Boomer was the big bird. But I was trying to follow the instructions that we had gotten from Eric Larson and Frank Thomas and Ollie Johnson. They were wanting us to observe real life and try to bring some of what we saw in real life into our films, and not just copy other animators. So I was looking at, I thought it'd be fun to animate the little bird. And one day I was out at the commissary where we would eat our lunches at Disney, on the Disney property. And I saw these little sparrows jumping around, and they'd move so quickly. And sometimes they do like a couple of seconds, 2 or 3 seconds. I mean, 2 or 3 poses in 1 second, like really fast little moves.
Wow, I definitely see that.
And so I looked at that and I said, I'll bet you I could animate something like that. We were being told at the time to not do anything that was too rushed or too complicated, keep it all very simple. But I went, you know what? I'm looking at that little bird, and it's not confusing me. I can tell everything that it's doing. I bet you if I animate that and try to capture that approach, it could work. So I did an experiment, and I would do things like that were very unconventional at the time. I mean, nowadays more people are doing it, but at the time it was unusual. So for instance, when I had the bird take off, it was sitting there and it would move just a tiny bit, and then it would just be a streak of color in the next frame and look like it had 12 wings, and then just be gone. And that was it.
It's like anticipation with a quick in between.
But tiny, only a few frames. And then I would do like bounces and little tail flicks, and I would smear when the head would turn from one side to the other, I would do like a smear frame where it would be like a long head for a frame, and then it would settle into where it was going, all these different kind of things. So when Art and Ted saw that in movement on the screen, they loved it. They thought it was really charming and different. and the other animators too. Brad and Brad Bird and John Musker and some of my other classmates really dug that too, and they wanted to try to do that same style. So then Art and Ted, after they looked at it and liked it, asked me if they could look at my drawings. So I showed them my drawings, and then they didn't want it. They said, "No, you can't do this drawing. It's all stretched. You can't. No. You can't do this in a feature. This is a Disney feature that doesn't belong." So after saying, "Yes, we love it. It's charming," when they studied my drawings, and they said, "No, can't do it." So I was so confused because I went, well, the audience is not going to look at drawings. The audience is going to look at the screen, and you liked how it was moving. So what we wound up doing was I would animate stuff the same way. I had looked at the birds, I'd studied real life, I'd put a caricature of that into my work, and I would show it to them, and they would like it. Then when they asked to have all the scene, they'd get a stack of drawings and go through to shoot through to make sure there were no offending drawings in it. My two assistants that were doing cleanup for me, they would hide all the drawings that would be a problem. They would take them out of the scene and hide them. Then they would take the amended scene to be flipped and approved, and they would go, okay, there's no bad drawings in it, fine. They would send it back. They would reinsert the drawings, send it to ink and paint and camera, and film it. We had to hide my work in order to get it into the film.
So
are you still there?
It felt like there was a little.
Yeah, I think he's starting to get excited.
No, I felt like it was a quick stutter, but probably because of the connection or something like that. But
right. So we had to hide my drawings in order to get the scenes approved.
Nice.
If they just looked at if they looked at my drawings, if they looked at my work on the screen, they loved it. When they looked at the stack of drawings, they didn't like the way the drawings looked. So my assistants had to hide the offending drawings and then get it approved, then reinsert them and send them to camera. And when we would do that, we could get it past them. Now, 10 years later, after the film was out, 10 years later, Ted Berman, one of the directors, said in an interview that he said, here at Disney, we've established how birds should look and how they should move. And we had an approach all the way from Snow White on through, Cinderella and all different things. We had the way we animated birds until this guy, Jerry Rees, came along and he invented this whole new way to do it. And it was wonderful. So here he was praising it. And he didn't know that me and my assistants had to hide the work from him in order to get it approved. So it's kind of a strange thing that he loved work that we had to sneak by him. It was crazy.
Yeah. So this film has one heck of a cast. We've got
yes.
We got Mickey Rooney as adult Todd, Kurt Russell as adult Copper. We got Jack Albertson as the hunter. We got Sandy Duncan as Vixie. We got Pearl Bailey as Big Mama. We got the voice of Tigger, Paul Winchell as Boomer. We've got the voice of Piglet as the porcupine, and we also got child actor Corey Feldman doing the voice for young Copper.
Right.
And he's like, he went in and turns out Corey Feldman was one of those child actors that went after his career kind of went downhill or something like that. I had the pleasure of interviewing.
Why do you always have to bring in those extra details? You're just like sidebarring too much.
I had the pleasure of interviewing. We had the pleasure of talking to Donnie Donegan, the child star of Bambi, and he actually managed to dodge that trap because World War II came along, and the actor kind of just.
Well, basically, he's better known as the perfect good CFD of the Navy SEALs. Yeah, funny backstory there.
Yeah. So Jack Albertson, I have never seen anything Jack Albertson has ever done outside the Fox of the Hound except one.
Yeah.
He was Grandpa Joe at Willy Wonka.
Oh yeah. That was an awesome role, yeah.
Oh yeah, and Mickey Rooney at this time, he's like 60. No, he's six. He's in his 60s. He's like 30 years older than Kurt Russell, who ironically started his career at Disney doing these funny little college films like the Computer Wore Tennis Shoes. Now
Computer
he's
wore tennis shoes. Yes.
I don't know. It's not like the world's most famous Disney movies, but at least he did get his start at Disney in some way or capacity.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
remember the computer wore tennis shoes. I remember enjoying Kurt.
so so um so it turns out
And then
Mickey
Mickey
Rooney,
Rooney.
yeah,
Well, go ahead. I think you're going to say what I was going to say.
you know, when he was not really I read an article once that when Mickey Rooney was not really recording all his lines for adult Todd in this film, during his off sessions, during
Yeah,
off time, he would basically talk to some of the other people about old Hollywood,
yeah.
a whole bunch, and he actually recalled, if you ever had an affair with some actress during that time period, you had to marry her.
Hmm.
Yeah, and and this guy was like really started off at like the way he sounds in this movie sounds like he was recording his lines for Santa Claus is Coming to Town, the Lincoln Bass special, and where he's playing young Kris Kringle,
You
and
know, it's kind of amazing that he did that voice, and not that many years later, he was in the Black Stallion, himself in live action, training the kid.
oh wow, that's pretty awesome. Also, so wait, we got no, wait.
Yeah, Jordan, it's almost been a full hour. Can we at least get our say in the stuff?
Yeah, go ahead, Sarah. Go ahead, Julia.
Sarah?
Yeah, how about you go, Julia?
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting. You guys obviously know a lot more about animation than I do. I just enjoy it. I don't know as much about it. But it's funny to hear you guys talk a lot about that this one has less drama and less emotion, because I remember this movie from my childhood as being one of the saddest ones. Like, I remember being impacted the most,
Mm.
maybe not like drama wise, but I remember, and I was talking to my husband about it too before this meeting, and he was saying he remembered it being really sad. It used to make him really, really sad too. So I think even if it didn't have the full cinematic drama that it was hoping for,
Hmm.
it's still, maybe as an adult, I didn't rewatch it specifically for this meeting,
Right.
but I watched it a lot as a kid, and I wonder if it would feel different maybe now as an adult. So I'll have to go back and watch it this weekend. But I
I
remember
think it
being
feels a lot more emotional for me as an adult. I mean, yeah,
yeah,
I agree with you, Julia, that, yeah, that uh, they still managed to pull off, making a dramatic movie, and they
yeah,
couldn't convey as much drama as they wanted.
I agree. Yeah, it still felt really emotional as a kid, but I'll be intrigued to see it again this weekend. But
Well, and I've talked to a number of people who did have it be impactful for them, and they have a nostalgia for it and everything.
yeah,
And I totally understand that. It's just while we were making it, we were very aware of the different choices. And for example,
yeah,
the opening with the
Yeah,
mom
thanks.
yeah,
that I didn't wasn't allowed to do would
yeah.
have made you feel even more hope for the child to survive, and to
I was
realize
thinking
how
that. Yeah,
much the mother sacrificed for the baby. And it would settle the question that she didn't just abandon her
yeah.
child
I
because
was
it,
thinking that
you know he saved
while
her.
you while you were explaining that scene that could have been, I was thinking like, wow, I really thought this movie was very, very sad. I imagine if that would have been in there too, I think it would have been even, you're
Because
right, it
then
would
you
have
would
been more
have then you would have
impactful.
started at then the moment you start trying to care for the baby, it's an orphan. So
Yeah.
that would have changed your emotional investment and made it a little higher to
Yeah.
try to solve the problems for the baby. Yeah.
Yeah.
But I'm happy that people connected with it as they did.
Yeah.
While we're trying to make things, we just try to get it as the quality as high as we can, and we
Yeah.
run into sometimes it's budget, sometimes it's
Yeah.
schedule, sometimes it's
Yeah.
politics or just different artistic opinions. And
Right.
once it gets out of our hands and is with the audience where it should be, and the story is being experienced, if people connect, I'm just happy.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, both my husband and I were talking about it earlier, that this is one of the ones that we do feel a lot of nostalgia for from our childhood. I mean, lots of Disney movies, but yeah, I really enjoyed thinking about this one. I'll have to go back. I didn't have time, unfortunately, to rewatch it this week, but I'll have to go back
Right.
as an adult now and see how it feels now that I have a little bit more empathy probably for mothers and
Right.
that kind of relationship, and imagining that scene that you described. So I appreciate it. It's always so fascinating to get so much background and all of these inside kind of like sneak peeks into it that you wouldn't get unless we talk to somebody like you. So I
Right.
definitely appreciate it, and super interesting.
Yeah, I
Yeah,
know.
well, I'm always glad to speak to people like your group, because I'm never quite sure what people will be curious about. And so for me,
Yeah.
that's a moment of discovery. I just find out where people's curiosity is, where their interest is, where their nostalgic connection with certain things. And
Yeah.
that's so informative for going forward, because as I continue to tell stories, it's just nice to know from the past what has worked for people.
Yeah,
Right.
definitely. So
Yeah,
so next
Sarah, do you
week,
have something that you wanted to share? I know you let me go first.
Oh, Sarah, go ahead. Yeah.
Yeah, Sarah, did you have thoughts?
Yeah. Well, yeah, I was, yeah, definitely wanted to be a just kept, those we kept around the house and made, yeah, because it's just like such a cute story and, anyway, yeah, this is a good time to wrap things up because I have yet to get dinner.
Okay.
Okay. So next week we're gonna cover the film that almost killed Disney animation. I'm gonna bring Ron Husband on, who was in my Inevitable Song of the South video, but was not with you guys. But I do believe
Yeah, complicated story there. You have to check the videos online.
Right.
I do believe Ron Husband worked on the Black Cauldron, so I probably would want to talk with him about this weird moment that in Disney history that made them reevaluate their decisions and try to get things really going again.
Yeah. So yeah, let's save the drama for later. Anyway,
There's
I'm gonna get
an
going.
image that was sort of okay, Sarah. I was just going to say one thing that hit me as a big contrast, even before I watched the film, because I went ahead and did see most of the Black Cauldron a couple years ago. But the concept art that Mel Shaw had done for the world underneath the ground was, so it had this sort of dark world above, and when he went down underground, the surprise was it was just filled with color and vibrancy and energy, and these elves that live down below the ground. And it sort of stood the whole idea of like, you would expect caves to be dark and you would expect the meadow to be colorful, but instead it was like a dark world above and a colorful, vibrant world below. So I was waiting for that, and I saw in the film when they went down below, it was just dark. It was like they didn't use any of his ideas, and I went, oh man, I'm so disappointed not to see that amazing surprise when you go underground.
Oh man,
But that was just one of 1,000 disappointments. So.
That would have been amazing. Yeah.
Well, I'm glad you guys are exploring this whole era, like step by step.
Yeah, we're
it's
exploring the whole
possible.
century step by step ish.
Excellent.
Well, thank you so much
A-listers
for
and
your time.
significant moments.
What's
What
that?
was that?
We'll
What
cover
did you-
My dinner's here. I gotta go.
Okay.
We
Bye,
are
Sarah.
covering the A-listers and significant moments, and the Black
Hey.
Cauldron is a
Hey, Mom,
significant
this is the
moment.
toaster
Bye,
guy.
bye.
You know, from Brave. He did the director of Brave Little Toaster.
Wow,
The
hi.
poster on the wall, yes. Hi there.
Poster
Nice to
guy.
meet you.
All right. So,
All right,
Bye,
yeah,
Sarah.
yeah,
are
you
we ready
can
to
go.
wrap up?
Yeah,
Bye,
I'm ready to
Sarah.
wrap up.
Okay.
Well,
Okay.
yeah, thank you
um,
so much for your time, Jerry. I appreciate it.
All
Yeah,
right,
it was
you're
nice to
very
meet you
welcome.
again.
Significant
good to
You're
see
welcome.
moments in
Thank you so
history
much.
coming up next week.
Okay.
Bye,
Mhm.
guys.
Bye-bye.
Later. See you next week.